Let's do it.
This meeting is being recorded.
Got it.
Right.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. All of our beautiful guests.
Thank you.
Wonderful guests. And this is the Storytelling Association of California, our personal genre series show. We've got a tremendous lineup for you here today, and I'm so glad that you are able to join us. We've got Mr. Ben Tucker from Contra Costa Tail Spinners, Mr. Bruce Marcus, who is our guest teller this evening. Angela Lloyd is with the Inland Valley Storytellers. If that's your group, give them a holla.
Hello.
Sharon Elwell with Do Tell Story Swap. And our own Ed Lewis from the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. Mindy Donner, Storytellers of San Diego. And Lynn Van Gelder from Story Masters. Welcome again, everybody. If you feel like it, tell us in the chat where you're from. I know we've got an East Coast person, at least one. Is everyone from California? But let us know where you're hailing from this evening. Now we're going to go right into our first teller in just a minute. I was trying to think of a way that we could get to know a little personal side of each one of our tellers. So after they finish their story, we're going to bring them on with me, and I'm going to ask them a couple of deeply personal questions so that they'll be able to let you know exactly who they are. So stay tuned for that. Okay, Mr. Ben Tucker is our first teller. Ben is again from Contra Costa Tail Spinners. Brother Ben, as we know him, is a storyteller, a singer, a podcaster, and an author. You can find his book, A Good Run, on Amazon, and also his podcasts entitled Storytelling Time with Brother Ben are available on Spotify. Ben is going to give us the story of Uncle Pal and his chickens. Take it away, Ben.
Thank you, Ashton. In 2018, I took a storytelling trip with a group by the name of Ethnotech, an Asian American performing arts group out of San Francisco. And we went to a small village outside of Beijing. And this village was known for its storytellers. It was a national landmark, a very historic place. And we went to their village and we spent 5 wonderful days changing stories back and forth. We told our stories in the public square, in libraries, in schools, and most important, in homes. And when we got into those homes, that's when the storytelling really started to link us together as fellow storytellers. Now, these farmers were known as growers of soybean and corn, but they were most renowned nationally and internationally for their stories that they told. Now, when we went into their homes, as I said, we really connected. We had translators who translated our stories as we took turns telling stories from America, and then we'd have one of the villagers tell a story as well. And as I scanned the room, listening to those stories, and I looked at those villagers, it took me back to a place where my parents are from, a little small town called Rodessa, Louisiana, right outside of Shreveport. And the reason it did was because my grandparents, they were farmers and they were also great storytellers. And so I started to feel like deja vu. Have I been here before? The people look different, but the feeling is the same. And then I looked in the back row, and there was one lone male out of all of the Chinese storytellers. And he was standing, not sitting like the rest of them were. And he was tall, he was long, he was lean, he was lanky, and he had big, long hands like my grandfather. And he was tan, same color as my grandfather as well. And when I looked at him, I had a flashback and I threw away the script of my planned story, which was going to be about a Nancy the spider. And I thought about this story that my grandfather told me on multiple occasions whenever we went back home for family reunions. And it was about his Uncle Pal. Now, Uncle Pal was a chicken farmer, but he was no garden variety chicken farmer because he had hens that laid eggs. They were jumbo eggs and they had double yolks. And everyone from around Cato Parish, which is where Rodessa was located, they came to buy eggs from Uncle Pat. The Black folks, the white folks, the young, the old, the bakers loved his eggs too, because they talked about how they made their cakes so much richer. And not only did he sell his eggs, Uncle Pal was very enterprising. He sold also chicken manure for people's gardens. He also sold chicken feathers for people's feathers and their quilts. And so Uncle Pal was doing well and had one son, he and his wife. But his wife up and died on him when the son was just 10 years old. And on her dying bed, she told him, Pal, I do not want you to raise this boy as a chicken farmer. Those days are over. I want you to send him to a good school. They just integrated them schools, and he can go to school with them white folks and get the same kind of learning and education they get. Send them to the best school. Don't send them to that little one-room shack up the road. And Uncle Pal did that. He sent the boy to school, integrated school from all the way through high school. And he was an excellent student. He excelled. He was very, very good when it came to oratory. He was an excellent writer. He was on the debate team. And he went to college. Like I said, Uncle Pal was making money off chicken manure, feathers, and those eggs. And he was making money hand over fist, so he could afford to send him to college. He sent him to Southern University, a Black college. And there he graduated at the top of his class. And he went on to LSU Law School in Baton Rouge. And there he was an excellent law student. He was on the bar review, graduated at the top of his class. He came out, set up private practice, and then he was recruited to a law firm as a full-fledged partner at a white shoe law firm. Big, big deal for a Black man back in those days. And so he became very, very rich, very prominent. And once he really got into the money, he told his father, Daddy, you just turned 102. You need to retire. You need to quit selling those chicken eggs and shoveling manure and everything. I want you to come and live with me. We got a big house. I built something in the back. You don't have to work anymore. But Uncle Pal said, look, why should I do that? He said, I love my chickens and my chickens love me. I got my old trusty dog, Rex. He loves me. My customers love me. I got great neighbors. Why I want to leave here? He said, because a man in my position, I can't have my daddy living in no one-horse town in a shotgun house. How does that make me look? He said, forget about how it make you look. Think about how I feel. And he let it go with that. But the son was not too happy, but he had to go along with the program. Now, one day, Uncle Pal was out shoveling chicken manure and sacking it up. And he slipped and he fell and he could not get up. And he called his old trusty dog, Rusty. And he said, Rusty, Rusty, because he talked to his dog all the time and actually sung to him too. Rusty, go on up the road and get Aunt Trudy. Now, Aunt Trudy was another old Black woman that lived about a quarter mile up the road from him. And sure as you born, old dog ran up the road barking, ran up to Aunt Trudy's house, scratching on her door, and she slung open the door and she looked and she saw that the dog was there, but Pal wasn't. And she knew something was wrong because Uncle Pal and that dog were inseparable. So she took off running up the road, lickety split, couldn't see him around, and the dog ran into the chicken coop. And she followed him and saw Uncle Pal laying down there, sloshing around, could not get up in the chicken shit. She got him up, walked him into the house, cleaned him off, gave him a big cool glass of water in a mason jar, and made sure he was okay. And she said, okay, I'm gonna go on back up the road here and I'm gonna bring you a plate. And I'm gonna make sure you're okay before I go back and spend the night at my own place. And when she got back to her place, she called Uncle Pal's son and told him that he had fallen. And when he heard that, he says, okay, that's it. This is the last straw. I'm coming right up there and get my daddy. And so he drove up there. It was a little late. And he said, okay, Pops, I'm going to take you to the hospital in the morning and get you checked out and make sure you're okay because you fell. I don't know if you hit your head or what. He said, no, boy, don't take me up there. They won't let me out the hospital. He said, Daddy, I'm going to take you up there bright and early tomorrow morning. And sure enough, that's what he did. He took him up to the hospital. They looked at him and they said, well, we're going to observe him because of his advanced stage to see if he had any neurological damage. And he stayed in the hospital for 2 days and 2 nights. Now, what the son did was, being an attorney, he got power of attorney over Uncle Pal. And you know what that rascal did? He sold Uncle Pal's chickens. He tore down that chicken shack and he gave his dog to Aunt Judy. And when they discharged Uncle Pal, he got in the car with his son and he thought he was going home. And when he didn't make the turn off home, Uncle Pal said, where you taking me, boy? He said, I'm taking you home. He said, my house is that way. He said, no, we're going to New Orleans. I'm taking you home. He said, you can't do that. He said, yes, I can do that too, Daddy. I got power of attorney. And Uncle Pal let out a big, long, wheezing sigh. He dropped his chin to his chest, and he never spoke a mumbling word after that. Uncle Pal lasted 2 weeks in his son's house, and he died in his sleep. The very next day, the old dog died, and the word got back to the community that Uncle Pal had died, and they talked about his son and said he was a most ignorant boy for somebody who was educated that would take Uncle Pal's sunshine away from him, because that's what he used to sing to his chickens. You are my sunshine. Mm-hmm. And when I told that story, I could see on the looks of the faces of the villagers that they got it. We had connected. And as we closed, I asked him for comments or questions. And the ladies were saying that the son he meant well, but he went about it the wrong way. He should have built a house, which is what their kids did when they went to the city, but they let them play with their stories. They allowed them to till the soil, but they knew that they had to maintain their roots. And then that gentleman in the back who looked like my grandpa, he raised his hand and he said his say in Chinese and he translated it. And it came out something like, you know, the smarter the people are, the dumber they are. and we all erupted into laughter. And that, my friends, was a coming together across 6,000 miles. And as I made my way back home on the plane, and I was reflecting on that trip and that experience, and I thought about an old adage that I'd heard so many times, that the shortest distance between people is a story. And that certainly is true.
Oh, Brother Van, thank you so, so much. Isn't it incredible how someone of a totally different ethnicity basically called into the room an ancestor of yours, and you did the story that you didn't expect to do? Well, thank you so much for that. Now, let me ask you a question, sir. Um, this may seem odd, but what smell, what smell do you really like?
It's easy. The smell I like is the smell of fresh cut grass.
Oh, yes. That's a good one. And how about what smell do you hate?
Uh, anything that smells of sulfur.
Eggs included.
Yeah. And Lucifer.
Well, thank you so much, sir. Thank you very, very much. Audience, next we would like to bring up Mr. Bruce Marcus, who is our guest teller this evening. Now, Bruce is a storyteller from Malden, Massachusetts, and he's been regaling audiences for over 3 decades throughout the New England, and also, thanks to the pandemic, well beyond, with his fresh as mint, original, true life, and made up stories, poems, and songs. He's the recipient of the Northeast Storytelling's 2021 Brother Blue and Ruth Hill Award. Bruce has been featured in many spoken word, coffee house, cable TV, and other performing arts series, as well as at a number of festivals and on PBS, the World Channel Stories from the Stage. Bruce serves as a committee member, a feature coordinator, and a frequent host for the long-running weekly Boston area storytelling series called The Story Space, which you can attend via Zoom any or every Tuesday evening from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, which translates to 4 to 7 p.m. Left Coast time. Bruce, what's the name of the story that you have for us this evening?
I have a story called The Tale of Two Grottos.
Okay, take it
Actually,
away,
the story
sir.
that I told on Stories from the Stage from PBS.
Oh,
But I was limited to 7 minutes there, so you're going to get the better version.
okay. We'll get
And
the 10-minute. Thank you.
and good evening, old friends, new friends, and friends I haven't met yet. It's so nice to see all of you here tonight. When I was an adolescent, one of my buddies and I liked to go into retail establishments and leave with merchandise for which we did not pay. Now, my mother, who could be strict at times, seemed to have not only her suspicions, but this uncanny radar for such things. Where did you get this? She asked, somehow plucking up from the jumble on my bedroom floor this pricey looking single volume collection of 1960s underground comics. From the bookstore, I told her, which was true. I just conveniently left out the part about not having paid for it. With what money? She asked. Ooh, I was afraid she was going to go there. From my paper route, I told her, which of course wasn't true. But hey, if she found out what I was up to, I was afraid I wouldn't be allowed to go anywhere again with my friends until I was old enough to be out of the house and living on my own. One afternoon after school, my friend and I paid a visit to the bookstore at the local mall. We found an aisle with some cool-looking books, checked around to make sure no one was watching us. Multiple times. pretty much telegraphing our intentions. And then we took some of those cool-looking books and we slid them into the pockets of our winter jackets. It was winter at the time, at least. All at once, this very serious-looking man descended upon us. He was an old guy, like 30, with a button-down shirt and lasers for eyes that bored into us. "I heard you boys were taking books," he said. My stomach turned to a solid block of ice, and my throat closed up to the size of a pinhole. "Oh, no, sir, not us," my friend and I squeaked in unison. Well, the man stepped over to my friend, who was standing with his jacket unzipped and the side flaps hanging forward and clearly loaded down. The man slapped the front hanging side flaps of my friend's jacket. Whap! A book. Thunk! Another. "Empty your pockets," he ordered. And while my friend sheepishly pulled brand new bookstore books out of the pockets of his winter jacket, the man came over and slapped the forward hanging flaps of my unzipped jacket. Fwhip! No book. Fwhip! No book. I had this old snorkel jacket. Some of you who don't live on the West Coast outside of the mountains might remember a winter jacket called a snorkel jacket that was fashionable back in the 70s, or at least popular. It was probably never fashionable. It was puke green with fake fur around the hood. Well, the bottoms of my pocket linings had long since ripped out so that anything that I placed into them sunk down all the way to the bottom of the jacket lining itself. On this particular occasion, I'd taken 2 books, one on each side, and pushed them all the way around to the back, where, one over the other, where I was quite sure they formed this large rectangular bulge clearly visible to anybody standing behind me, which at the moment this man was not. "Follow me," he said, and he somehow single-handedly simultaneously led and followed us toward the back of the store. Now, we were basically decent kids. It didn't even occur to us to resist. We followed him like sheep being led to slaughter. Well, I'd never been in any real trouble before. I was giddy with panic, practically incontinent, as he led us through a door on the back wall, down a small corridor, and into the bookstore office, which, as it turned out, was actually a small grotto, dimly lit with torches, skulls lining the walls, and it occurred to me they must be the skulls of other young shoplifters. Dripping stalactites hung from the ceiling, and I realized with horror that they were dripping with blood, the blood of other young shoplifters. "See that sign?" the man said, and one appeared out of nowhere right where he was pointing on the dank, slime-covered stone wall. It read, "Shoplifters will be prosecuted." Now, I'll admit how is at 14, I didn't know exactly what prosecution meant, but I knew that it portended trouble, big, lasting trouble. And I thought, oh, please don't prosecute me. But we're not going to prosecute you today. And I thought, oh, thank goodness. We are, however, going to call your parents. I pictured my mother, her hands on her hips, her mouth drawn in a thin, firm line, and I thought, prosecute me, please! The man then asked us for our telephone numbers, which, being the compliant ovine we were, we gave to him accurately. He then lectured us for another interminable 5 minutes, and then told us he was going to set us free, adding that if he ever caught us stealing in his store again, he would proceed with prosecution. He then led us out of the bookstore office grotto, down the small corridor, and back into the bookstore proper. The walk up the wide main aisle was the longest of my life. Numb with shock, I trudged along, past the curious stares of bookstore staff and the legitimate shoppers, past the accusatory glare of all the brand new, shiny books lining the wide aisle, all the while acutely aware of the large rectangular bulge in the back of my jacket, waiting for someone to stop me at any moment and demand that I empty out my jacket pockets and decide to prosecute me after all. And waiting for me at the front of the store was the merchandise detector. I knew if no one stopped me before then, that surely would And as I marched along toward that merchandise detector, looking at it through a tunnel of fog, I had the curious sensation that as each step took me closer and closer to it, it kept getting farther and farther away. And then all at once I was right up to it. And now I was stepping into it. I cringed, waiting for alarm bells to blare. Miraculously, none did. I stepped out through the other side into the atrium of the mall, and I was free, but hardly relieved, because I had just stepped out of the proverbial frying pan and now was headed into the fires of hell back home. To my complete astonishment, my parents had completely redecorated our kitchen that very afternoon in the exact same grotto style as the bookstore, complete with torches and skulls. At the dinner table, the interrogation began at once. "So," my mother asked, "what did you do after school today?" She asked this in a light, conversational tone that I knew was designed to lull me into a false sense of security. "Nothing," I told her, being sure to maintain careful eye contact with the food on my plate. "Just went to the mall." "Oh," she said. "Who with?" I told her the name of my friend who'd been with me. "I hope you boys aren't shoplifting." I pushed my face closer to my dinner till my nose was practically touching the meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "Don't worry, Ma," was all I could think to say. And then I sat there with my head hanging over my plate, waiting for the guillotine blade to come down and separate my miserable head from my body. I sat in this position 3 weeks while my mother took another bite of dinner, and then she said, "I hear the Gainsboroughs are going to be cutting down the oak tree next to their driveway that pelts their cars with acorns every fall." And I thought, she changed the subject? Did the guy from the bookstore call her? All the rest of the meal, I wondered. The rest of that evening, hanging out in my room as much as possible and avoiding my parents, I wondered. For days, weeks, months, I wondered. Fast forward 25 years. I'm a young adult now, a storyteller, and I'm telling this same story in an art center in the western suburbs of Boston. In the audience on this particular afternoon is my now elderly mother. When I reach this point in the story, I stop, recognizing the fact that she no longer holds any punitive authority over me. I look out at her in the audience and I say, "And Mom, did the guy from the bookstore ever actually call you?" And my mother said, "No." And I thought, he didn't call? He didn't call? The guy from the bookstore never called. And then I realized he didn't need to call. I mean, yeah, he had the authority of being a bookstore manager or whatever, and knew very well, actually, how to scare kids straight. But there was one thing the man utterly lacked and for which he was absolutely no match. And that, my friends, was the power of maternal radar. A Tale of Two Grottos. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Now's a great time to give our tellers some love. If you want to put something in the chat for Bruce and also for Brother Ben. You know, you naughty kids had all the fun. I really wanted to be a naughty kid, but I never had the nerve. I remember in let's see, I was been 12 years old. This was in junior high school. All the artsy kids in one of my classes decided it would be fun to go to the Bernstein Brothers art store and steal the colored pencils, Venus coloring pencils, but we'd only take one at a time. I say we, but I never did. I was too chicken. So I got money from mommy. I bought an entire set of the Venus coloring pencils, and then I would tell all my friends that I swiped them from the store one by one, like everyone else did. I so wanted to be one of the cool kids. Thank you for that story,
But now
Bruce.
you're a storyteller, so you
Now
are one
I'm
of the
a
cool kids.
storyteller. So listen, Bruce, what profession would you like to try other than storytelling?
Ooh, I would really love to be, I think, an eco tour leader in some really exotic place like the Galapagos Islands.
Wow, I would go. That sounds cool. And what would you never like to do for a profession?
Oh, that's easy. And I see this going on in my neighborhood all the time. On these hot, humid summer days, I see these guys up putting new roofs on houses. I would not want to be a roofer for so many reasons.
That's a good one. Thank you. Thank you again so much. Okay, audience, ready for our teller number 3? Angela Lloyd. Angela's with the Inland Valley Storytellers. She lives in Victorville, California, and we're seeing her beautiful outdoors right now. And she was an artist in residence grantee from the years 2000 to 2003, funded by the California Arts Council. Angela received the 2013 National Storytelling Network Circle Excellence Award. She's going to treat us to a story entitled In and Out the School Window. Take it away, Angela.
Thank you, Ashton. Hi, everybody. When I started to tell stories at Walden School, was in Pasadena, I was stepping on a storytelling path that had been laid by Milbree Birch. So Milbree had applied for an artist in residence grant at the encouragement of the head of school, Carol Perlee. And when Milbree and her family moved to the East Coast, the school spoke with me and we started to talk about my applying for a grant so that I could also do that work at the school. So Walden, the community of Walden, was very invested in storytelling. And they were having, if you can imagine Milbree being your artist in residence for your first 3 years in elementary, you would be on a pretty good path. And so I had accompanied her to watch her with the students and see the kinds of things she was doing. And then I stepped on, and I always, even while I was there and when I would look back, I always remarked at how the head of school and the teachers always accepted what I brought to the table. And nobody ever said, you know, Milbree used to la, la, la. They never did that. And I always was so, I never really thought about it because nobody did that, but I was very encouraged and I loved being a part of that community. So one of the things that Milbree had started was something called Story Weavers. And these were children identifying themselves to work on a story and to learn it and learn it by heart. And then they would tell in the classrooms at the school for children that were younger than they were and their own age, but not above. And also the other thing that had gotten started at the school was there was a Pasadena Public Library just down the street from our school called Lamanda Park Library. And Milbree had already coordinated with them. And so the youth librarian there was accustomed to being in touch with the storyteller at school and finding out what day we would be ready to bring our students to tell stories. And then the youth librarian coordinator would contact schools that were nearby that could walk to the library. And she would invite students from those schools to come to the library and hear the Walden Story Weavers tell to them. So that was amazing. I particularly loved it because I didn't need to call the schools to arrange any of that. The librarian did it. All I had to do was support the children at Walden and get them ready or support their getting ready. The other thing we often did before we went down to the library is we would make sure that the children had time and a chance to tell in the classrooms at Walden. And one thing we learned was that if we made it so that a child could tell their story 3 times on the same day, there would be this amazing development in the storyteller. We could watch them take their seat, start to engage with an audience, and see what that engagement was really like. And then the next classroom we went to, we could see that the children who were telling started to understand the horse they were riding in this exchange moment with the audience. So that was remarkable. So I wanted to tell about one particular time. And this was a year where a young girl named Jillian chose to tell Hansel and Gretel as her story. And I always had encouraged the children to think about the story in a sequence of images. And the primary coach that I gave to them was, tell us what you see. Tell us what you're seeing. And I let them know that it was very possible and probable that every time they told the story, they would be seeing something new and they would be seeing something different. So they could absolutely make a choice to decorate Red Riding Hood's house a whole other way, or the grandmother's curtains on the kitchen door. They'd heard me do it many, many times. And so they knew that in the minute of the telling of the story, they could build the story in that moment. And so I could see them begin to sort of listen to the story while they were telling it. I could see them taking their time to visualize and then share that with us. So on this particular trip, we all marched down to Lamanda Park Library, and that's a 5-block walk. So that was very good to have a walk before telling a story. Highly recommend that. And then the children that came from the school, we noticed they were in uniforms. So they had very crisp white blouses and navy skirts or navy shorts or navy long pants. And the teachers were not in uniforms, but there were probably 4 or 5 teachers coming down. And so we always would bring a quilt and we would hang it up. And we also had 3 stools at the school that were engraved with the words Walden Story Weavers. And they were 3 sizes, one for a small chair for the kindergarten children, a middle-sized stool for the 1st and 2nd graders, because having both of your feet on the ground is very important to be very steady. And then the tallest stool for if we had any taller kids. So we would carry those down with us. So one person took their turn. Sometimes they would choose, the younger children sometimes would choose to tell a joke. Or sometimes there was one child one year in 2nd grade, he told Perseus. His parents had been reading Greek myths to him. And he told Perseus. We got him to tell it in just like a 15-minute section that day because he took 30 minutes telling it to us at lunchtime. And he was totally comfortable doing that. So it was Jillian's turn. And so she started to tell Hansel and Gretel. And one of the things she shared with the children was that it was not uncommon in old times for there to be, that the children in a story might very well be hungry, because they're often in those old times. And she said, sometimes even now, children go to bed hungry and children have a fear of being hungry. And so in Hansel and Gretel, when the parents couldn't feed the children, they planned to take them out to the woods and leave them there. And of course, a young boy took breadcrumbs, dropped them, and birds ate them. And they did make it back home. But the next time they went out, he took small stones and dropped those. And then she got to the place where they saw the house in the distance. And she started to slow down. And she said, you know, I don't know if you've ever made a gingerbread house at Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, but this house in the middle of the forest was made of gingerbread. They couldn't see it from far away, but when they got close, they could smell the gingerbread. And she said, on the roof, there was frosting. And she heard the audience go, huh? And she said, yeah, it was really thick, white, vanilla frosting. And she felt this ripple amongst the children in the audience. And she said, and you know, the path to the front door, it was made of, and we could see her looking at us and wanting to just put the just right thing in front of that house for the path. She said the path had Reese's peanut butter cups. And there was this gasp from the children. And someone went, ooh. And someone said, I love Reese's peanut butter cups. And she said, you know what the door was made of? And someone said, no. She said, it was a graham cracker. It was a double graham cracker. And it had chocolate on the back. And the windows had M&Ms. They were stuck in the gingerbread, the yellow and the red and the blue. And there was just this vibration happening between the children and Jillian. She was solid on that stool. She was completely loving these children and wanting to give them exactly what would taste good in their mouths. I saw one of the teachers really like looking at the kids, and I could see her being bothered by the energy of the children, or somebody answering with Reese's peanut. I love Reese's peanut. And I saw her start to get up out of her chair. And the teachers are always in the back, why? And I got out of my chair really quick, and I went around to her and I stopped her before she got around where the children could see her. And I just pulled her close and I said, let's just let them enjoy each other. I said, just imagine a plug in an electrical socket. I said, that is what is happening. And Jillian finished decorating the house and then brought the children in. And then she told them what the witch looked like and how she had an old ratty bandana on her head. And then she continued with the story. And it was so fabulous. And when we all got up and to go out of the room, you could feel this, like we'd all been on a retreat of some kind. We'd all had this amazing breath of fresh air. And we'd all had this chance with her holding the bone for Hansel. Maybe he would eat it. And we all had that moment when she was looking in the oven and Gretel gave her a push. And we all had the moment when they made their way home in the early morning light and when their parents greeted them on the front porch. We had a wonderful time in the residency, and the children grew up and they went on to do debate. They went on to be in plays. I see some of them on Facebook now, and they're doing theater, and some of them are having all kinds of other jobs. And I went on and stayed at the school after the residency for 4 more years. And it was really fantastic. And it's been really great to think about that time again and imagine it and tell you what I see. Thank you.
Love you, Angela. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your idea of having the kids see these images in their head, it's like you were giving them their first introduction to storyboarding. And, I'll admit, eliciting the smells and the sights and the sounds is always a challenge for me when I'm writing a story. And I'm going to use that method. I'm going to picture those images when I write. And I think that's going to help me tremendously. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It was just really, really a lovely story. Angela, I'd like to ask you, what is your favorite word?
I think the word lovely is a good one. Something you can count on.
Okay, lovely. And how about your least favorite word?
I'm going to need 2 words.
Okay.
And it's let's go.
Whoa. Deep. Thank you, Angela. Thank you again so much for your story and for your favorite and least favorite words. Okay, who wants to go next? How about Sharon Elwell? Sharon is with the Do Tell. I love that, the Do Tell Story Swap. Now, she shared with us that the annual Mariposa Storytelling Festival is what lured her into the field of storytelling. After attending for several years, it occurred to Sharon that I might be able to do this by myself. Her story is entitled Brian's Miracle.
I was working the day watch out of homicide. Actually, that's not true at all. I don't know why I like to say that. I just like to say it all the time. And I can't seem to stop myself when I get an opportunity. In truth, I was working the night watch in the emergency room at the reception desk in Queen of the Valley Hospital in Nampa. And an emergency room is an unusual, unique atmosphere. For one thing, nobody that's there was hoping that was where they were going. Nobody comes there joyfully. And that night, as I looked around the room, there was a young couple and a small child all in pajamas. There was what looked to be a wedding party, some of them in tuxedos and formals that were beautiful. And there was a team of girls in what looked like basketball outfits. And they were all differently dressed and different behaviors, but they had one thing in common. They were not happy. They were sad, they were mad, they were scared, but they were not happy, except for this one man who came bouncing up to the reception desk and said, "Can I tell you what just happened to me? I think I have learned how God deals with his children. I think I've had a miracle." I was really ready to hear a good story. So I said, please, please tell me. I would love to hear about it. And so he said that he had been downtown that very night when he bumped into a person everybody in Napa knew. Her name was Nettie Hutzberg. And Nettie was a very familiar character. We often saw her wheeling her grocery cart up Third Street or Main Street with all of her possessions. And she was sturdy. She walked miles every day, and she was prickly. Sometimes people felt like they wanted to do something to help her. Somebody would bring her a cup of coffee from Starbucks, and she would say, you do know that that rot gut isn't good for you. Or somebody would bring her a gift card from McDonald's, and she would say, don't give me that. That's not food by any standard. She was a little hard to deal with, but she was great at taking cash if somebody to do that. Well, on this particular night, she was not at all herself. It was cold, it was raining, it was drizzling, and Natty was getting sick. She had that feeling you get behind your eyes when you know you're coming down with something. She felt coffee and her chest hurt. And she was a good 2 miles, more than that, away from Queen of the Valley, which was the only recourse in the evening at that time. And she was going to have to do the thing that she hated most about all the aspects of her situation. She was going to have to ask somebody for help. And so she watched the people coming toward her, and they didn't make eye contact. They didn't listen to what she said. An occasional person opened her purse and pulled out $1 or got in a pocket and gave her a bill, but nobody heard what she was saying. She wasn't asking for money. She was asking for a ride. And then she spotted Brian, and she knew him to be of a kind, gentle disposition. And so she thought, oh, thank goodness, and went up to him and told her dilemma. And Brian said, you know, I would love to help you. I would always be glad to help you, but not tonight. He said, I've been out of work now for some time, and I spent all day going from job site to job site all over this valley. And it's raining, nobody's hiring. I didn't have any lunch. I'm cold and I'm wet and I need my dinner. And you're going to have to find somebody else. I'm sorry. And he walked on and left her there. Well, he got about halfway down the block, and his conscience started dinging him the way your conscience does when you think, oh, you made a mistake there. And so he turned around and went back, and he said, I'm sorry, I'm just tired. Of course, I'll give you a ride to the hospital. And so they put her cart behind the blue dumpster in back of the Chinese restaurant on 3rd Street and climbed into his old pickup and drove to the hospital. Well, when they got to the ER parking lot, he turned off the car, and she said, no, you don't need to come in with me. And he said, oh, yes, I do. He said, if you don't feel good enough, you don't feel well enough to walk down here, you're not going to feel well enough to walk back. I'll come in. I'll come in and wait for you. And so he did that. He went into the emergency room, and they found the blue plastic chairs and sat down and waited for the triage nurse to call Nettie. And when she did, Brian took out his wallet to see whether he had enough money to buy something at the cafeteria. Would there be anything for $2? He didn't think so. He called his wife and said, don't wait dinner for me. I'm going to be possibly hours before I can get home. And as he was doing these chores, he looked at the man seated across from him. And that man was smiling at him. And that seemed odd. And so he looked at him. Nobody smiles in AD. And he looked again, and the man said, "You don't remember me, do you?" Brian said, "I'm sorry, I don't." And he said, "We were together on that job in Marysville last summer." "Oh, yes, I do too remember you." And so he took his hand out to shake hands and walked over and sat down next to the man. And the guy said, "What are you doing these days?" And Brian said, "Well, that's just the problem. I've been out of work for 6 weeks now and I can't find anything." And the man said, "Well, I wish I'd known that." He said, "I've been working at this job in Benicia now, and we're down a man. We're supposed to be finished by February, and at the rate we're going, we won't be done till June. If you have any interest in it, I could call the boss. I'm sure that he would put you on." And that call was made, and those plans were made, and they agreed to meet together at 5 in the morning in the Target parking lot to drive to Benicia. And Brian came up to the old lady at the reception desk and said, "Can I tell you what just happened to me? I've learned something about how God deals with his children. I think I've had a miracle."
Some love for Sharon. Thank you. Thank you for that touching story. Oh, gee, I think I've had a miracle. You know, I think I know which question I'd like to ask you since you ended up on that note. Sharon, what would you like to hear the Almighty say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
See. No, I think I would be happy with, "It wasn't perfect, but you did all right."
What more could he ask of us or she, huh? Lovely. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, we're about halfway into our performance. Who needs a stretch? Anybody need a neck roll? I know I do. Ah, beautiful evening. Very lovely. And it's actually cooling off here in Altadena, California. All righty. Next, Ed Lewis from the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. Now, Ed tells us that he's a storytelling groupie, attending as many storytelling events as possible. He is a board member of the Storytelling Association of California and the Sacramento Storytellers Guild, as well as one of the past Pacific Region liaisons to the National Storytelling Network. Ed is a retired teacher of young children, as well as an early childhood education professor who's had the privilege of telling stories to children throughout the world as Eddie Spaghetti. He has taught storytelling classes for teachers and performed for adults, sharing personal stories and tall tales since 1994. So Ed, what's the title of the story that you're going to share with us this evening?
The 75-Year Secret.
Ooh, okay, take it away.
She was beautiful, playful, and the life of the party. Children were enthralled by her stories, and everyone in town loved to see her glide across the dance floor like Ginger Rogers.
Oh, wow.
Those attributes, however, led to some difficulties that she experienced for a few years. In 1942, she became pregnant with the married mayor's child. Now, in small town dairy community, Minnesota, that couldn't be discussed or revealed. So when she had her son Ellert in 1942, she said nothing about the father. The children often lived with the grandparents on the dairy farm, while in this case, the mother worked in town. There was speculation that maybe it was the handsome tractor salesman that had come to town often, or that elegant ballroom dancer that would come from out of town every couple of weeks. But nothing was said of that. Unfortunately for her, she became pregnant again by the mayor, who was a state legislator now, married with 2 children, 4 years later. Once again, they couldn't tell anyone. So she told everyone that in the 2nd month of her pregnancy, before she showed too much, she was going to Seattle to visit her brother, who had prostate cancer, and to care for him. Now, 7 months later, she returned, and he had a miraculous recovery, and everything was kind of under the table. There were some rumors about an illegitimate child, but they were just rumors. And 4 years later, she married Elrod Huffman. And in 1952, she was pregnant with a girl. Misfortune struck her again, though. And Elrod was driving his farm truck out to a job, and he lit a cigarette, and there was an open gas can in the front seat, and it blew up and killed him while she was pregnant with Vicky. Fortune changed. The following year, she married Lloyd, and he adopted Vicky, and then they had a boy and a girl in the next 4 and 2 years. It went on to have a good life together. He passed in 1983, and she lived to be into 2011. The last 10 years of her life, Vicky, her daughter, and her lived together, and they were going to open a family childcare. But her mother got dementia the last 3 years of her life and couldn't handle being around children. So that didn't happen. Well, going back to 1946, that's when I was born. I was the illegitimate child. And what my biological mother had done was connect me with a great family that wanted children through a private family doctor. Now, I always knew I was adopted. And my parents, the ones who raised me, my real parents, always told me that they adopted me because they loved me and wanted to care for me. And I always had a special place in my heart from them saying that throughout my life. Well, last year at the age of 76, I was reading through some of the papers of my college students, and they do a socialization paper of their life. And a lot of them had been doing 23andMe, and coming up with just fascinating things. And for some reason, that triggered a desire in me to try and find out about my biological family. So I did Ancestry.com, and a genealogical friend of mine went through it and found all this information. And she connected me with a full brother and a half sister and a half brother's wife. And they sent me pictures, photos of my biological mother, the grandparents, the whole family tree back to 1850. And this last year, my full brother and I and the half sister have been in communication, and I have learned so much from them. So this summer I planned a trip across the country. That's where I saw Bruce and invited him to come to this event. But in Minnesota was my first stop. So I got in touch with them and came out and spent a week with my brother, met his wife, met his children, made a beautiful connection, lots of tears, just the richness of our love and caring for each other. He is now 81 and his health is somewhat declining, but he still can communicate well. And I learned about he dropped out of school in 8th grade. It made me wonder about what my life would have been like there. He got arrested when he was 18 for stealing a safe with 3 buddies from a lumberyard and got 19 years in federal prison. He had alcohol issues, 19 years, 19 months. He had alcohol issues until his wife divorced him and said, okay, I'll marry you again if you get off alcohol. And 2 years later, he straightened out and they've had a great life together and have these 2 children and many grandchildren. My half sister, Vicky, I went and spent 2 days with her, and she was at the age of 16, a professional pool player. And she got to be known as the Minnesota Fats of pool women players. And she used to go to Vegas and be sponsored by bars that lied about her age. She won many tournaments and she started entering men's tournaments and winning them and ended up marrying one of those pool players. And together they had a couple lovely children that I got to meet. So this whole experience of being with them was really just kind of came full circle with my life. It enriched my life. Vicky took me out to our mother's gravesite and the grandparents. I got to thank my mother for having the foresight to put me up with a really great family. And it was a very meaningful moment for me. We went around, saw the family where they grew up. I just learned many things, more things that I'll share in this story. But it was a great experience. And it's like I've, reflecting back on it, it definitely was an enriching experience. And I have 4 adopted children myself and 6 grandchildren. And I have always told them that the more people that love you in your life, the richer your life will be. And some of them have, or some of them, 2 of them have contacted their biological father. One was responsive, one wasn't. But my daughter found a half sister that she's deeply connected with now. So all that experience for me has just enriched my life. And I know I'm going to continue that because we've made a good connection and we contact each other by phone, every couple of weeks. So thank you for listening to my news story.
Thank you so much, Ed. And bless you, sir, for paying it forward and adopting children as well. My question for you is, what sound or noise do you really like?
I love the sound of violins and also choir voices in a cappella groups.
Okay, and how about what just grates on your nerves as far as the sound or noise?
Grates on my nerves. An out of tune instrument.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, thank you. Okay, we're going to bring to our virtual stage Mindy Donner, who is with the Storytellers of San Diego. Now, Mindy has performed on 3 continents. She was a guest editor for Storytelling Magazine in summer of 2019. Her favorite pastimes include being a volunteer English teacher through Rotary with teens in Tijuana. also being on the team that brings Youth Standing Strong Story Arts Camp to you through the miracle of technology. Plus, being involved with great storytellers, vis-a-vis Storytellers of San Diego, SAC, and Artists Standing Strong Together. So, what's the title of your story, Mindy?
Title of my story is Sidewalk Shaman, and I'm going to get up to tell it. So that might take just a moment of repositioning. Thank you, Ashton.
Thank you, Mindy. Great time if you want to put any more comments in the chat for our previous tellers. Thank you so much. We love you, audience.
We were on the road again to Baja. Our destination was San Ignacio Bay or Guerrero Negro, where the whale calves had been birthed. Oh, the dust, the interminable dust, and the spectral remains of animals on the sides of the road. The coveted skeletons of cacti, the gnarled trees, and the cows, every night at dusk, walking in a single file, so close to our car that I could feel their bovine breath. I was terrified we would hit a cow. So we made a pact that every night at dusk, we would turn into the nearest lodging place, and we did. We went to San Ignacio, a little village of my dreams. It was about 5 streets snaking around an ancient mission. Now we knew that the mission was the site of great repression of the people. But today, it is very quiet. And I like to sit in the sun. And then I meander through the herb garden, and I play a game to try to identify as many of the medicinal plants as I can. That's my ritual. Then we headed down, well, after we checked into Rice and Beans, the premier surf hotel. Now you might be thinking that they really call themselves arroz y frijoles. No, it's called Rice and Beans, and that may give you some idea of the atmosphere. And they had a grand little restaurant. Then we went down to the riverbed, which we had never explored before. We scrambled down and past the yurts for rent. And oh, we were greeted by the most magnificent stands, great big stands of blooming yerba mansa with their stately white daisy-like flowers. We grew these at home in our garden. And it started with a modest one plant that bore the label native plant, but native to where? I'd never seen it anywhere before. Well, I thought maybe it bloomed way up in the Sierras in Northern California or someplace like that. But no, they greeted us. I was in bliss. And we explored around a bit, and with mud oozing between our toes and sandals, we clambered up and tried to make ourselves a little presentable. We saw across the road on the sidewalk a diminutive man tacking up a sign, sidewalk sale. We never missed a sidewalk sale if we could help it. We straightened ourselves up even more. We walked across the street. Now the man wasn't this small. He was just scarcely bigger than myself, if that. And we couldn't wait to dive into the piles of flotsam and jetsam that were stacked high on many tables. But explore as we may, we couldn't find anything useful. Even I couldn't find anything useful, and I collect spare parts. Sometimes I make puppets out of spare parts. There was nada. Well, there were these rough-hewn seats that were carved right out of logs and upright. And so much like Goldilocks, we sat down and tried several seats. Oh, this first seat was too scratchy. And then the next seat was not wide enough. And then the third seat was entirely uncomfortable. And besides, they were much too big to put in our vehicle. I really wanted to buy something from our host, who was bemusedly watching us and making affable comments from time to time, encouraging us to poke around more. Well, we went to the rocks and mineral table, because surely that would yield up something. And we looked and we looked, and then our host came and seized a glass egg, a cobalt blue and white swirly glass egg. And he used it as a massage tool right in my spouse's back, like so. In all the strategic places, it was like a deep tissue massage. And oh, Ray was just so gratified. I knew he'd be amenable to any adventure we'd have from then on. And I really wanted to buy something from this man. Well, I didn't have any money on me. But then a curious thing happened. I'm not sure how it happened. Our small host instructed us to put our arms around one and the other in a very specific way, and then to look up or down, as the case may be, into each other's eyes and say what we liked about each other. Well, this put Ray under considerable pressure, because he usually will say that what he likes most about me is I had avoided jail time, and he knew I would be furious. So he coughed something up, and I said something appropriate. After that, our host directed us in a series of actions and words. In fact, we were renewing our marriage vows in a very gentle way, and it ended with a hug and a sweet kiss. Oh, it was strange, but it was delightful. And I really wanted to buy something from our host. And then he unbuttoned the top two buttons of his Oxford cloth shirt, our host. I am a shaman. And there, as if to prove it, was a intricately woven golden chain interspersed with semi-precious stones, an amulet of sorts. Well, indeed. We asked him questions. Yes, he had been to shaman school up in the mountains high in Sonora, and told us a little bit about his practice. We talked some, and I asked Ray to find some money in his wallet. We would buy something. I wasn't sure, what would we buy? The egg. We would buy the egg. Ray opened his wallet, and I saw the small man looking at Ray's driver's license. And he took out his own wallet and showed us. Eduardo had the very same birth date and year as Ray. Tocayos, that lovely Spanish word that signifies more than one thing. It could be, oh, from the same village of origin, or the same birth date, or the same name. Tocayos forever. And then Ray fished in his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill and gave it to our host, who promptly gave us half a geode each as a gift. We thanked him and walked on, marveling at this chance meeting with the sidewalk shaman. Or was it? Thank you.
Gracias, Mindy. Gracias.
Nada.
Every time I see you perform, I get more and more enamored of your movement on stage. If
Thank
I
you.
were to pick another profession for you, I would say dancer. But
I
tell
have been
me,
a dancer.
what profession would you love to try other
Yeah.
than storytelling?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's a great question. I think I would like to do something in the health field. I'm not sure what. It just seems like it would be wonderful and challenging. And I have danced all my life. I have.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, lovely, lovely SAC audience. We have our final artist coming up for you, and that is my friend Lynn. Are you there? Yes, there she is.
I'm
Lynn
here.
Van Gelder. And Lynn is with the Story Masters group. Lynn tells us that she would like to thrive, to feel alive and vibrant in every way, body, mind, and spirit. Long ago, she realized that for her, this meant travel. Lynn believes that when we get away from our daily routine and experience new places and people, that the broadened perspectives help us connect with each other. So last I heard, she was going to tell the story entitled, tell us, Lynn.
The Intrepid Adventures of Lynn Van Gelder.
Take it away.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Auntie Lynn's eponymous Tiki Bar. Many stories are told from this venue, and I hope you'll enjoy the one I'm telling tonight, although I feel it might be a little heavier than what I've heard from others. But anyway, here goes nothing. Someone said, and I believe it's true, travel leaves you speechless and then makes you a storyteller. When I was a kid growing up in a suburb of Buffalo, New York, I developed a bad case of wanderlust. My mother never liked to travel, so the only family vacation we ever took was an annual 4-hour drive to visit my paternal grandparents in Western Pennsylvania. To say I was bored would be a gross understatement. And I made my first intrepid adventure alone at age 14 when I took a Greyhound bus by myself on an adventure to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My wanderlust was ignited. When I got my driver's license, my own car, my world expanded. And I tell stories of my adventures. But recently, one particular trip has been on my mind, and it's a story, something you and I have in common, folks. We all have a tale of where we were on September 11th, 2001.
Mm.
In early September 2001, my husband and I were in Hawaii celebrating his 50th birthday. We were staying at a beautiful resort on the Big Island and acting like rich folks by island hopping over to Honolulu to see the Don Ho show and spend the night at the Ilikai before flying back to Kona. We had a great time, of course. Big love for Hawaii, always. We flew home to Los Angeles on September 8th, 2001. And on September 9th, I was scheduled to be in Las Vegas for my company's senior officer conference. At the time, I worked for the Marine Division of ConocoPhillips Petroleum in lovely offices in Long Beach, California. Our 7th floor suites overlook Shoreline Drive and the racetrack route for the Long Beach Grand Prix. The offices of the World Trade Center were across the street. We were taking half the officers of our fleet to an event in Las Vegas for training and team building, with the other half scheduled for the same conference a few weeks later. That morning, my husband and I had a little argument because I wanted to drive to Las Vegas, but he insisted that I should fly, saying I was too tired and jet lagged to make that drive by myself. So I relented and finally took the hour-long flight to McCarran. The company had arranged for all of us to stay at the Alexis Suites, which was a non-gambling hotel across from what was the Hard Rock Casino. I checked in and I caught up with my teammates, and we all planned to meet for dinner. The following night, September 10th, we saw George Carlin, the comedian, performing some new material that, frankly, I did not find funny. He talked about our love of disasters and how fascinated we are when we see bad news and when the worst things happen. That was September 10th. The next morning, 9/11. When I woke up, I was having the strangest out-of-body experience I have ever had. I was floating above my body, watching myself get up and start to get ready for my day. I saw myself go into the bathroom and turn on the shower. The shower didn't turn on. Instead, the entire plumbing mechanism came off in my hand. Still floating, I didn't do the logical thing, which would have been call and report the problem. Instead, I got dressed, I picked up my cell phone and my plumbing and walked down to the lobby. This whole time I'm floating above myself, watching this happen and wondering why I felt so strange. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking anything weird. I was just out of my body. And when I got to the lobby, there were about 30 people that were silent and standing there, just watching the television. So I looked at the television and thought at first I might be watching some disaster movie. And then it hit me. This was news, and we were under attack. The second plane hit. Still out of my body, I called the company travel agent and I said, get me a rental car, something I could take out of state. We need to go home. I regretted listening to my husband when he insisted I fly. The travel agent said, you know, everything's shut down. I said, get on the phone, Kyle, make it happen. And then I tried unsuccessfully to reach my husband. Didn't we all just want to know that our loved ones were safe? He was having a weird morning too, and we were not able to connect until much later in the day, because had I reached him sooner, he would have driven out to Las Vegas to come and get me. At some point, I got back in my body, and then whatever part of my brain it is that works in an emergency, the part that says, okay, now we need to do this, and then we need to do the next thing, and so on. That part kicked in, and I'm grateful that so far I don't seem inclined to panic, but instead to take action when the defecation is hitting the oscillating circulator. The travel agent called me back. I got you a minivan, and that was all I needed to hear. Las Vegas was closed. No shows, no air travel, no helicopters. All the lights on the strip flashed American flags. Neon American flags, as far as the eye could see. People couldn't leave by plane. Many of our officers actually bought cars to drive home, reasoning they'd just sell them once they got there. My rental turned out to be a brand new Dodge Caravan that cost over $600 for a one-way rental. And I didn't care. I gathered my boss, the president of our division, and 3 key managers for the fastest road trips they had ever taken across the desert. Because once I got on the road, I put the accelerator to the floor and didn't stop until we were home. My boss looked truly terrified, but I did not slow down. We didn't know if we were going to be attacked further. All of us were tier 1 oil spill response responders. What that means, we had to keep our oil tankers far at sea away from ports and in emergency communication modes. One disaster scenario on our minds was the worst case, an attack on an oil tanker at the mouth of Los Angeles Harbor, which could cripple the entire country, both economically and environmentally. Our offices were across from the World Trade Center. Would that location be attacked next? We didn't know, but we had to respond as if the worst was happening and war was coming. Let's not forget, 2,996 people died that morning. Countless more were injured. My husband's friend was on a business trip to Boston, and they had argued about him flying home that night. He insisted he was tired and just wanted to stay over, which he did. Otherwise, he would have been on flight 11. Where were you? Since that day, we've gone on numerous adventures because I still have wanderlust in my heart. I tell stories of every adventure, but there'll never be another one like this one, I hope to God. I will always remember that horrible day. Travel leaves you speechless, then makes you a storyteller. Now you've heard mine.
Love you, Lynn. Thank you so much for that story. What question should I ask you? How about, what is your favorite sound or noise?
That's a good question, Ashton. My favorite? My husband telling me he loves me. It's
Oh
a good
gosh.
sound.
Oh. I love you. That's a good one. How about your least favorite? Is it coming from your husband too?
No. My least favorite would be if somebody tells me, oh, but that's so hard. Because I think what worthwhile thing in life is easy?
Mm, get it, girl. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
So
Ashton.
everybody, oh, did you have, I'm sorry, did I cut you off, sweetheart? Lynn?
Nope.
Okay. We're at the end of our program for this evening. And if everyone would care to unmute and let us hear your beautiful voices. I definitely want to thank Mr. Shag's Chagrin for taking care of the tech for us this evening.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a warm, warm thank you to you, Shags. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
My first time hosting for SAC, and it's been a pleasure.
Oh, you were
You're
great.
terrific.
you.
Terrific.
So encouraging.
Great job.
Our
Fabulous.
storytellers, Brother Ben Tucker from Contra Costa. I love saying that. Tail spinners.
Yay.
Marcus was our special guest teller this evening.
Yay,
Boston.
Bruce. Terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Angela Lloyd from Inland Valley Storytellers. Angela told me
Yay,
she was having a
Angela.
little video problem, so I hope her
Yay,
face
Angela.
is
There
here.
she is.
Hey.
Yeah.
No, I just
Hey.
came inside. Thanks.
Okay. And from Do Tell Story Swap, Sharon Elwell.
Hey, Sharon.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sharon.
Thank you.
Ed Lewis, hailing from Sacramento Storytellers Guild.
Yay,
Hey,
Ed.
spaghetti!
Good job. Good job.
The dancer, Mindy Donner from Storytellers of San Diego.
Yeah.
Yay, Mindy. Good job. Good
Mindy.
job.
Thank you.
And our lovely Lynn Van Gelder representing Story Masters.
Excellent.
Nice
Lynn,
job.
thank
Los
you so
Angeles,
much.
right?
This
Well
was
Los
done.
Angeles.
Very well done.
terrific.
Such a great time, everybody. Such cooperative and professional storytellers, I must say. I must say it's been a pleasure working with all of you. Look at this audience here. Hi, John White. Don't try to escape. I see you. Hi, Eva. Hi, Tina. Hi, Rupa. And I see you, Sarah. and all these folks. This is wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for coming, Nikki and Penny. We really appreciate you. You just don't know.
Sounds like romper room.
And all the listeners from Boston, that area that came along with Bruce.
And stayed up so late.
Oh,
Thanks for
super. Oh,
coming.
that's right.
Coming.
Oh my gosh, 11:30
God.
on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Well, I confess I'm a ringer. I'm a bi-coastal person because I spent 30 years in Los Angeles.
Oh,
Okay.
Right.
In Boston.
right.
I just want to say this is my very first time with you guys, and I'll be joining for sure.
Oh,
Great.
Nikki,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you,
Alright.
Nikki.
And by the way, Ashton, I love your voice. You got a wonderful voice.
Wonderful
Yes,
voice.
he does.
Oh.
Yes, he does.
Does.
Bless you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And not just your voice, your hosting sensibilities are spot on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, she did so much
Fabulous.
promotion and other things that were just
And as one of the
Amazing.
tellers here, I can tell you that her communiques were really clear and timely and information packed.
Terrific.
Oh,
Great.
I appreciate that.
hosting.
And
But I had
Ashton,
lots of help.
this is
The
this
host
is the
who
fir-
came before me gave me lots of help.
and this, I think, is the first time we've had some questions like you asked. They were very creative and interesting. Thank you. for that.
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up because I don't want to steal the kudos for those. Is anyone familiar with or remember the Actors Studio?
oh yes.
The Actors Studio, that program, that's where I got the questions. At the end of each interview,
Right.
host James Lipton would
Yeah.
ask his guests all of the questions, so I just picked out a couple that I thought would be intriguing. And storytellers, thank you for being so cooperative.
That was great. That was great.
I want to apologize to my fellow tellers because my video is going out.
I
And
see,
I can't be seen, and it looked like I wasn't listening, but I was listening. Oh,
Shadow knows.
There it is.
who knows? I enjoyed very much what I heard.
And we could see you pretty well when you were telling, and that's
Yeah.
the
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
But it was already getting fuzzy and weird, so I don't
Yeah.
know what's causing that, but
Good night, Rose.
My video is always fun.
Ashton and Shags. Oh my gosh.
And hello to Lori Friedman. She was a neighbor of mine at one of the first housing co-ops in the country, which is in Davis, California.
Wow.
She still lives there.
It still is.
That's great.
So I never get around to the chat. I love everybody's chat. But at the very end, I just want to say what a fabulous evening it was. Such beautiful stories.
Things you can do if you're on a computer, if your chat is open and you're on a computer, the chat at the bottom should have a couple of icons with 3 dots, and the 3 dots has more. Click on that and you'll see Save Chat, and it will save the chat to documents and a Zoom folder under your documents. And if you do want the chat, I always get it, so just request it from me, and I'm happy to send it along.
Who's saying that? Is that Ed
Shags.
or
Shags.
Shag.
Shags?
Yep.
Can you send it to me? Because I'm on my phone, so that would be great.
Probably.
Yeah, the
Thank
one caveat there, though, is if you received any direct private messages from anyone,
Yeah.
Shags will not have that to give to you.
That's okay.
Mhm.
All right. I'm going to say goodnight, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, Angela. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you,
And
Ashton.
everyone,
Appreciate you.
next month on the 3rd Wednesday are folk tales. So
Oh,
All right.
someone listen to
tales
folk
there.
tales.
Great.
Okay.
Forward to that. Bye, Diana.
Thank
Hi,
you.
thank you. It was a lovely evening.
Thanks for coming.
Good night, all. You ready to go? Because I gotta
Thank
get.
Tina for putting
I
together.
gotta take my
the
wife to the
flyer
airport
every
at 5 in the
month.
morning. So
Oh.
Thank you all for coming.